The Philadelphia 76ers are digging themselves out of the hole that they dug themselves in to begin the season ever so slightly, but they have now won 10 of their last 13 games, including 4 in a row, and are now sitting in 10th place in the Eastern Conference, one game out of the play-in round, and it looks like things are starting to ball for this Philadelphia 76ers team. Joel Embiid had a dominant performance last night with 37 points. But I think the story of the night last night was the role players in Gershon Yabusele and Kelly Oubre and what they did on the floor last night. You look at Kelly Oubre with a plus 22, Yabusele with a plus 17, Oubre putting in 15 points and Yabusele 16, including a big dunk in transition over Denny Advia. But the big concern around this Philadelphia 76ers organization for the longest time has been, what can you do around Joel Embiid to build a competent enough roster? They have two max contract players next to him in Tyrese Maxey and Paul George. But it was kind of the role players. What other guys bring to the table? You're paying Tobias Harris so much money to be such a role kind of mid type of player that never was a full max contract type of guy. You weren't able to really fill out the bench. You had guys like Danielle House. You had guys like Greg Monroe. You had just terrible players trying to eat up these small kind of contracts. And now you got guys making major contributions on this team alongside the max players. You had Caleb Martin's big day on Christmas against the Boston Celtics. Yabusele has been awesome this year. And Kelly Oubre, I want to give him his flowers as well and how he's been playing this year, because when you look at Kelly Oubre and what he's been in his career, you can look and point to him and say he's a good scorer for bad teams. We saw a couple of times. This was a guy that could average well into the double figures. He had the one season right around 20 points per game, but he's never been a real winning player, contributed to winning things. He's really bought into his role on this Sixers team, and I think it's for the best. Kelly Oubre this season, you look in the recent games, he's been playing really well, and I think he's a guy that you have to just kind of watch the game and appreciate his energy, his athleticism, his effort that he's been bringing. He's not a full total box score guy, but last night, 15 points, 8 steals, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, in 37 minutes played, and he was a plus 22 as well. You look at the stats from last night right there, as we just kind of mentioned it, but 15 points, 5 rebounds, 8 steals, first Sixer with those numbers since Rocco in 2015. This was a Sixers team last night as well that forced 26 turnovers in that game. And just a really impressive kind of defensive performance there for them to do that. And Kelly Oubre to have 8 of those as well. Over this 4-game winning streak that the Sixers have, he's averaging 9.5 points per game, a little over 5 rebounds per game, and 2.5 steals per game. That is perfect for what he's been brought in to do. Sure, there's going to be nights where Paul George is out and he has to go out there and take more shots. And he can do that. He can go out there and put up 20 points for you on a given night. He can go out there and put up 25 on a given night. But he's not the most efficient shooter. He's not the most efficient scorer. So obviously you would like those games to be kind of few and far between where you're counting on him that much. Because this roster, obviously, as we know, as I've talked about in here many times, built around Embiid, it's built around Maxey, it's built around Paul George, but you need these other guys to be able to step up and play their role as well. And guys like Yabu, guys like Kelly Oubre, guys like Caleb Martin are starting to look like he's doing it as well. That's what this Sixers team has so desperately lacked over the years, the assistants to help their stars, whether it was James Harden and Embiid or whether it was Ben Simmons and at his peak and Joel Embiid. The other guys around them weren't stepping up, and Kelly Oubre, with performances like he had last night, is just what the Sixers need. 15, 5, and 8. Defensive effort, his energy, his athleticism on the floor. When he's attacking the rack, he is one of the better players, role players that you could find in the NBA. I truly believe that. And you just look kind of in the recent games in the month of December. He hasn't been shooting the ball that well. That's kind of his bugaboo, his red flag, I think, his efficiency from 3-point range, especially this season, only shooting 34%. But he's still shooting 50% from the field. He's attacking the rim well. He's rebounding really well, 6.6 rebounds per game. He had the 8-steal game last night that we talked about and averaging 12.8 points per game. And when you have Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid on the floor shooting as much as they do, you shouldn't be expecting much more from Kelly Oubre. And for him to be able to finally buying into his role and what the Sixers team needs from him is huge, not just to get out of this kind of funk and the mess that they got themselves into to begin the season, but for going forward and potentially making this deep playoff run as well. We talked about it many times, but the one goal, the one major emphasis for this Sixers team is just have one deep playoff run with Joel Embiid, one potentially healthy playoff run with Joel Embiid, and you're going to need these role players to step up in the big games, in the big moments. I mean, you even look, and I don't know if I would call him a role player anymore in Derek White, but you look at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and how awesome they were during the run last year. But you can look at Derek White and say he might have been the most impactful guy, and obviously he's not considered a role player anymore. But the Sixers never had production from one of their kind of 3 to 4 best players, fifth best players. It was always just the one and two. And what did you get from the rest? Not much. And that was what really was leading to those early exits for the Sixers. But when you go back and look at the entire box score from last night, I think it's a perfect kind of microcosm of what this Sixers team is in need of and the type of performances that they can have when those role players step up. And last night was a game where Paul George has not really been that consistent recently. And that's been my biggest issue with him, his up and down consistency. We need him to be at least a 21 to 23 points per game type of guy. I think 23 is kind of your max there. Maybe even you can lower that to 19, but he can't be going out there and having 9 points. But when he does, guys like Yabu and guys like Kelly Oubre were able to step up. Caleb Martin doesn't have a great game last night, but he finishes as a plus 27. He plays good defense. Doesn't really shoot the ball that much last night. But Kelly Oubre steps up in the scoring department. Yabusele has another really good game and is looking like one of the best underrated kind of free agent signings of this entire season. So when it comes back to kind of the big picture of this Sixers team, it all starts and ends with Joel Embiid. If we want to just go back to the box score for one more time with that one. But his performance last night, 37 points, obviously dominant there on the defensive end as well. He's kind of anchoring that defense, and I think that allows them to be more aggressive in a night where they forced 26 turnovers. We saw Kelly Oubre have 8 steals. That is a performance though from that's allowable, that's able to happen because of Joel Embiid and just his presence there on the defensive end. 9 rebounds last night, a plus 26. No blocks, but just his overall presence in the lane is just him being on the floor is just so valuable to this Sixers team and proves why he might just be the most valuable player in the league. He's not going to get the award obviously because of missing games due to injury already and the game requirement, but just his presence and his ability to be out there on the floor is so huge for this team. There's no beating around the bush there. There's no sugarcoating that. Just him being out there allows the Sixers to really buy in and kind of play a different defensive type of mindset. And I think that's what guys like Yabusele, guys like Kelly Oubre, guys like Caleb Martin have fully bought into. And even nights where Paul George doesn't have his best stuff, doesn't have his A game, you're still able to go out there and dominate and beat a team in the Portland Trailblazers that you should go out there and dominate and beat when you have Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George in the lineup all at once. So it's been great to kind of see the evolution of the player that Kelly Oubre has became from a kind of a wild card guy to a fun player, an exciting player at times, but he's a little bit too all over the place to be a full time like role player. Was more of a good player for losing teams. I think that's kind of the best way to put it. A good scorer on losing teams. He would never be the number two on a winning kind of championship team, number three even, but for him to be the fourth or fifth option for the Sixers, for Yabusele to kind of put his name in the ring there as well, that is exactly what the Sixers team needs for these role players to continue to build and continue to grow and find themselves on this Sixers roster around these max players. But it looks like the Sixers are starting to turn the corner. They had that one awesome offensive possession last night, moving the ball around, playing great defense, forcing 26 turnovers, and they've now won 10 of 13, 4 in a row, and a very easy, not very easy, but very, very winnable games coming up on the schedule that could get them over that 500 mark that they've been chasing since the beginning of the season. But as always, we'll be keeping it locked here on Sixers Digest. A big week this week on another West Coast road trip, but the Sixers look to continue their momentum, continue to build on what this has been a strong past couple weeks here, and especially coming off that big win over the Celtics, it's been great to see the Sixers not kind of squander any of that momentum in the meantime. But as always, give us a like, give us a subscribe if you can. Drop a comment. Let us know. What do you think about Kelly Oubre? What do you think about Yabu? Is this a team that needs to go out and make a trade now that they've been looking better? KJ Martin's still out with a foot injury. Is there a potential replacement for him on the horizon? We'll be talking about it all here on Sixers Digest, but have a happy new year, everyone, and we will talk next time.